Journeying across the United States, The Last of Us Episode 4 is the road trip episode we've been waiting for. This was an episode which had to set a lot up after last week's beautiful breather episode. I'm Aiden Green, I love The Last of Us, and I'm doing weekly reviews for The Last of Us, so make sure you subscribe so you can get more Last of Us weekly reviews. I love talking about the show because the game is one of my favorite things of all time, so subscribe and like this video to help the algorithm so more people can enjoy Last of Us content, because that's what we all want, right? More Last of Us. We love The Last of Us. So on that note, I'm going to stop talking about myself and instead talk about The Last of Us. So this episode starts with Ellie with the gun. She's like kind of trying to figure out how she's going to hold this gun, practicing what we find out is like a Fedra hold. And you know, she's looking kind of cool with it. We've all been there. You know, you pick up a toy gun and you go like, all right, how do I look with it? Am I holding it right? I remember I even had like a Harry Potter wand when I was a kid, and I'd like practice my wand stance of how I'd hold it. We're all lame. Not as lame though as the jokes that Ellie starts telling to Joel, because Ellie picks out a joke book and in it is some of the worst jokes I've heard in my entire life. But that's the point, right? We start to establish their relationship and they have a lot of fun, not at the start, but the joke book becomes a pretty pivotal part of breaking the ice between them and, you know, starting to have a bit more fun. They're fueling up at a fuel stop, and whilst they're fueling up, Joel says that they have to fuel up more often now because over time, fuel breaks down, which is just a really nice sort of world building point, something that I think comes into play a little bit more in the second game when people are using horses to transport because there's less fuel around, and probably any fuel that was around has now completely been destroyed. It's a great little attention to detail. Back on the road, we get a recreation of one of my favorite scenes of the game where Ellie is reading through an erotic magazine and she's like, wow, all the pages are stuck together, and Joel's like freaking out like, Ellie, that you probably, and then she throws out the magazine. She goes, sayonara, asshole, or something like that. That's a great little scene. And then I was kind of waiting. I was like, when are they going to do the tired scene? Because the tired scene is like, it's like chef's kiss. It's like this beautiful, funny cut. You know when Ellie's like, I'm not even tired. The episode does really well at setting up a bunch of guns that are gonna go off, both physically and metaphorically. Obviously, there's the gun that Ellie's using that she uses later on in the episode, but there's also things like the introduction of these guys. Are they called the Hunters? Are they what the bad guys are called in this? I think they're called the Hunters from the game. You know, we start to establish that there is bad guys out there in the world. The people that you're gonna bump into when you're road tripping, they're not the type of people that you want to be bumping into. The people that are gonna rob you, and Joel says they're gonna do much worse things to you. They establish that very early on before you even meet the Hunters, and I think that's a good way of sort of, you know, we're setting up a gun so that when it goes off later in the episode, we're gonna be like, we know what's going on here. These guys are bad. Joel's clearly very experienced, and when Ellie does ask him if these hunters are going to find them, he ends up keeping watch with a gun for the rest of the night, because even he's scared of what these hunters will do if they find him. It's a really ominous end to that scene that starts with a bit more comedy. I think Ellie makes a joke about a scarecrow, and it was actually a good joke. It made me chuckle. Thanks, Ellie. So basically, this scene sets up what the most dangerous threat of The Last of Us is, not the infected, but The Last of Us. The last of humanity is the most dangerous thing in the world of The Last of Us. A little touch that I liked was that when Ellie wakes up in the morning and she's like, it's so bright, what is that coffee smell? Joel has already packed up everything for her, kind of like a father would for a kid. Joel's done all the hard work, which shows that I think he's caring for Ellie a bit more and is, you know, starting to treat her a bit more like his daughter. And the journey to Boston continues. Road trip! And then we have another bit of foreshadowing. Once they've gone off-road and they're kind of making their way through Boston, the camera pans to a pile of bones, and there's just a tints of smoke. A tints of like, you know, these are newly burnt bones, or fairly new. So there's people in this town, and they're probably not gonna be good. Just a guess, you know, pile of bones on the ground. Probably not a sign that these guys are that friendly. Like in the game, we see Joel and Ellie get ambushed in a fight that was so satisfying for us game fans. Limited shots and the inclusion of a stealth component to the action was a big tick off the list. Speaking of which, Joel finally crouching is a massive win. I understand that probably sounds really weird for anyone that's not familiar with the game. Joel crouching is a win. It is a win. It's basically what The Last of Us is just Joel crouching with a rifle and shooting stuff. It's iconic. Ellie saves Joel with her gun, which once again is one of the guns going off that was set up earlier in the episode, a both metaphorical and physical gun. But it establishes a darker side to both of these characters. We find out that Ellie has killed someone before, but we also see that, Joel has done some dangerous and some bad stuff in the past too. And he sends Ellie back into the room so that he can finish off the guy that Ellie shot. And this guy gives Joel a knife as like a trade, as like a peace thing, like, please let me live. And, Joel, he uses that knife, that gift, the gift of the guy he's about to kill him. So, I get it. Guns, you can't reuse bullets, but you can reuse a blade. Ellie asks why Joel knew that was a fake thing. And Joel says, one of my favorite lines from the game, I've been on both sides. I'm just getting a little bit of shivers just thinking about it. What has Joel done? Last of Us prequel? The Joel early years? Bring it on! Hire me! That's what I'm here for. This is my pitch. So we're introduced to the bad guys, who I'm just going to call the Hunters. I think that's what they're called in the game, the Hunters. This time they have faces, which they don't have in the game, because in the game, they're just a fleet of really intense, ominous bad dudes. We get to meet Kathleen and kind of her henchman kind of dude in here, and they're a really good threat. You want to establish a really badass antagonist by making her do something pretty bad early on in the episode. And what does she do? Our first instinct is that she kills someone. She shoots a doctor in the head because she kind of has this realization that doctors can't really help people that are being shot fatally, So she kills him. This dude just kills him. Pop, 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 pop. You're a doctor? Pop. You're a doctor? Pop. That's how Kathleen's gonna work. God, I'm losing it. We're also introduced to this sort of sinkhole. The ground is like throbbing, like it's alive, like perhaps there is some infected in there. And I'm just gonna take a guess that perhaps next week we might get introduced to our first bloater who's going to come out of that sinkhole. Like, rawr. That was just stupid. But it's ominous, it's effective, and it's a clear threat. So that's a gun that's been set up to go off next week. And we have one final gun that's set up in this episode, which is Sam and Henry, who in the game kind of do just pop up out of nowhere. I think there might be a few murmurs from Hunters here and there, but you never really get them established as, the main guys that the Hunters are looking for. In this, we see the Hunters, they're going to the old site that Sam and Henry had been staying at, and we hear who they are, and the final gun that goes off is in that final scene when we see Sam and Henry holding a gun to Joel and Ellie, which before that was a beautiful scene. It's Ellie finally makes Joel laugh with probably the most cringe joke of them all, but they laugh, they lose it, it's nice, these guys are clearly bonded, fantastic stuff. So in the end, this episode was about two things. One was setting up the future conflict for next week's episode, but the second thing was about setting up a trust between Joel and Ellie. They trust each other. Ellie saved Joel. He kind of has a bit of faith in her now. He's finally got, I guess, a bit of hope. So this episode gets a double thumbs up from Aiden, probably another 10 out of 10 episode. Big fan of what they're doing with The Last of Us. I can't wait for next week. This was like a two-parter, so I can't wait to see what they do next week. I know it's gonna be good, it's gonna be juicy. So if you want to hear my thoughts on that, make sure you do subscribe and like this video so you can come back next week and hear my thoughts and ramble and pronounce words wrong, because apparently that's what I do half the time. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.